Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar organized by Funds for NGOs. Today's topic is Artificial Intelligence for NGOs in the 21st Century. I am Anutma, your moderator. I am excited to guide you through this session. Thank you all for making time to participate. This webinar will run for 60 minutes, which includes a 45 minutes of presentation, followed by a 15 minutes of Q&A session. If you have any questions, please use the Q&A option on your webinar screen to post your questions, and we will respond to them during the Q&A session. Thank you once again for joining us. Let's dive right in. The webinar's objective. First objective is to help participants to maximize AI for fundraising activities, donor management, and personalized engagement. To assist participants on how to use AI to assess, evaluate, and improve the effectiveness and efficiency of their programs. To guide NGOs on how to utilize AI tools to create educational material and instructional content. To discuss with NGO leaders challenges and opportunities in adopting AI solutions for future growth. Please note that the webinar is being recorded and the recording will be made available in the video section of Funds for NGOs premium website. And now allow me to introduce today's trainer, Dr. Christopher A. Johnson. Dr. Christopher is an award-winning journalist, editor, publisher, and business management consultant since the 1980s. He is also a former Commonwealth Nuffield Cambridge Press Fellow, Management Science Fellow, a certified Commonwealth Youth Worker, holder of an MBA in Marketing Management, and a doctorate in Business Management. He is renowned for his visiting tutorials in bid writing, business planning, leadership marketing, and organizational development capacity building. He is both founding director of Global Entrepreneurial Development Services Limited and chair of Community Education Academy of Leadership. He supports economic and social policy initiatives in Africa, the Caribbean, the Middle East, and South Asia. Now, I kindly request Dr. Christopher to lead the session and share screen.
Thank you very much indeed, and thank you very much, participants, for coming here and participating in this very important presentation. All presentations are important, but this is equally important from the point of view of what is taking place at the moment in our world of not just technology, but we are living in an age of information where information is being taken for granted, where information is being misused and abused by powers all over the world, and consumers themselves who are imbibing information also have issues in determining whether the information that we have at our disposal is true or false. What I can say is that on this platform, whatever piece of information and data you receive is adequately sourced or well sourced, and we make sure that the information is also useful and relevant to what you're doing. So you can trust this particular platform of the Funds for NGOs. Today we are focusing on artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is really, it's about man-made or women-made intelligence, used a combination of engineering, sciences, and machines to teach machines how to act and behave as human beings. And of course, if human beings have an input into it, it will have issues. Today we are looking at not just the definition of AI, but also the relevance of it to the NGOs. We're looking at how AI can influence fundraising projects or the capacity for fundraising. We are looking at it in terms of education and training, This morning, I spoke to about 20 to 30 college students between the ages of 20 and 50 who were surprised by how AI can influence their lives in many ways. We're also looking at AI in terms of social media, how it influences the networks that we use, how it influences humanitarian work across the world, particularly in the face of the cutback in funding or the removal of funding of the USAID support. We are looking at ethical and legal considerations, the challenges of AI, and more importantly, the future of it. So let's get cracking, as we say. First of all, what is artificial intelligence? This morning, very few students, the oldest was 52, could define what artificial intelligence is because they think it's all about machine learning. Well, artificial intelligence simply means combining engineering and science. And over the last 75 years, you will notice there from 1950 onwards, we've always had aspects or evolutionary trends in artificial intelligence, starting with the Turing test, which was designed to test whether a machine can respond to a human stimulus or a series of human stimuli, right to AlphaGo, where we introduced the Google side of things. In fact, we were talking this morning about Google Earth, and very few people understand that Google Earth also has an intelligent set of networks that can be used to track and trace individuals where they live, the kind of houses they live, the kind of property they have, and other personal effects. That is how powerful technology has developed over the last, as I said, 75 years in terms of AI. So really and truly, AI is really a combination of science and engineering, trying to ensure that machines are as intelligent as human beings. And of course, that is not always the case because the machines do err because of bias, among other things. But coming back to the non-governmental organizations like ourselves, how relevant is AI to the work we do? This is a very fine example of how AI can be used for micro-planning in terms of malaria outbreaks. How do we deal with that when it comes to pregnant women or even lactating mothers, mothers who are breastfeeding? And so, for example, you have a case in point where you have to look at the problem or the issues. In this case, we're talking here about symptomatic factors regarding malaria in pregnant women. What are the causes? Of course, the causes would be either poor hygiene practices, lack of materials and equipment, maybe not enough anti-malaria drugs, etc., and possibly shortage of medical professions to deal with treatment. And then, of course, if we are using technology to access information, how do we use it? Certainly, the technology can help us to access more effective drugs. Treatment, of course, will have to be done by human beings. We can't depend on technology to treat that. Technology can facilitate the process. Of course, technology can help us to monitor the quality of treatment. It can help us to understand the severity of malaria or whether it is mild or otherwise. And of course, it can also lead to proper identification of where the malaria is. Is it in villages, districts? Is it in waterborne disease areas, for example, riverine areas, rural areas, etc.? And then, of course, using the technology, it can help to either reduce the level of deaths or mortality, or alternatively, it can be used to come up with a policy on malaria prevention, even though malaria, of course, itself can be deadly. So this is a very fine example of how we can use artificial tools of intelligence, if you like, to help and support people who are vulnerable in our various communities. And if we add this tool to the detection of other diseases like cardiovascular conditions, respiratory conditions, you would find that we can also use AI tools for this purpose. However, it is the human input that is important, and that is something that we will look at as time goes by on this platform. Many of you are grappling, or I should say many of us, because we're all involved in this anyway. Fundraising is something that is ongoing. We talk about it every day, every night, every week, every month, every year, but we can never find the correct answer. But if we use AI tools effectively and efficiently, we can be able to access information on the various fundraising agencies that exist, whether it's the public grants government, whether it's private sector funding, donorship funding, or whether it is donations by individuals. And in this instance here, we show how using artificial intelligence tools, you can generate information. That information, of course, has to come from sources. And then that information is stored or preserved. And then using the model of algorithms, etc., you can be able to analyze, the data, for example, how many funders exist, where they exist, what kind of programs they are funding, and how that funding can be used to affect change and development in your organization. But again, you would notice here on the screen, there's a brain on the right-hand side at number 2. So the brain is the receptacle of information. The brain is the receptacle for processing information. It generates ideas, and those ideas are then turned into actual information and data. And then, of course, you come to predictability. How do you predict funding using AI tools? Well, the way to do it is to read reports, study statistical data on fundraising, and again, try to find out where funding can be had, because AI tools could only be used so far as the human being is capable of providing that information and data. So this is certainly a case in point where we can use artificial intelligence tools to access data on fundraising, etc. This morning for 2 hours, we were discussing with some students how artificial intelligence can affect their professional development, their career advancement, with career guidance now being almost diminished now in colleges and universities across the world, even though some lecturers would say that is not true, or vice chancellors would say that's not true. But the evidence is very thin on the ground that students are being arbitrarily told that they have to use AI tools for research, etc. But there are lots of issues around using AI tools. So for example, if you have an essay to do or you have a project to do, you need to understand what is the project, what is the concept behind that project, what are the issues before you actually use AI, whether it's a ChatGPT or any other. And then you have the issue of students struggling because they're not creative enough. Now, not because you use technology, it means you're creative, because creativity comes from being imaginative, being able to imaginize situations, being able to actually see situations for what they are. And a lot of people cannot do that. And so when they use ChatGPT, most of them have issues. Yes, they use the technology, but they don't understand, for example, how to input information. And that's an issue. People who use AI need support, not just from technologists or computer experts, but they also need support from research people, research scientists, because they are the ones who understand how to go about doing research using technologies. And so half of students who use AI struggle to come up with proper assessments and guidance in their work. And then, of course, you have guidance around AI, how it is used for intellectual theft. If you notice, every piece of information here is sourced. At the bottom, you would notice it is sourced because we are paying homage to people who actually help us to provide information. So it is very important in education and training to use AI tools effectively and efficiently. How do we use AI in social media? How could we add value? And here social media is referring to Instagram, TikTok, Pinzet, LinkedIn, Facebook, X. All of these are social media platforms. WhatsApp is now being used sometimes as official platforms. And I'm sure that some of you have been listening in to what is happening in the United States with the security fallout of breaches using a particular platform that is creating its own internal problems. But it is a lesson to learn that social media should be used for what it is, social discussions, personal. It should not be used for professional means. Some people use it as a convenient tool or platform, and that also creates problems. When you compromise information that is sensitive to your organization and put it on social media, you are damaging the credibility of the organization. And so machine learning is where you actually input information in the AI tool to access information, like ChatGPT, for example. Then you have the NLP. This is where you engage with different individuals and you analyze media posts, etc. Then you have your computer vision. This is where you actually discuss disaster preparedness issues. You look at imagery or images from the disaster area like tsunamis, earthquakes, volcanoes, tornadoes, and other natural disasters. And then you've got the robotic process. And this is used for administrative or repetitive work. And that is why some people are scared that they will end up being robots because all they're doing is routine entry, like information, data entry. People who are involved in accountancy, for example, will have to be doing that quite a lot. People who are involved in diagnostics in the medical profession will have to be involved in robotic processes. And then you've got your chatbots. This is used to respond to queries, recommendations. It is also used to access information on personnel development, and so on. And then those of us who are interested in analytics will find information quite a lot on LinkedIn and Facebook that you can use to trap information or collect information on consumer spending, the characteristics and features of different people, men, women, what is it they're talking about? And you can use all of these platforms to conduct what is called analysis of predictability. And then you have, of course, opinion, the opinionization of news, what people think about governments, what people think about public institutions, what people think about charities, sometimes regarded as sentimental analysis. Sometimes we call it sentimental analytics. And then you have recommendation systems. So, for example, women who are in the fashion business and the accessories business will obviously look online to see where good reviews are so that they can purchase items that are important. People who like luxury items, cars and jewelry, for example, can use these sites to access information in terms of their preferences. So there are several tools that we can use in social media, but again, we have to be careful that these tools are authentic, not just recognizable, but they're authentic and they're true in their usage. Very importantly, for those of us who do humanitarian work across Africa and South Asia in particular, and parts of the Caribbean, the Eastern Caribbean, where you have disaster control relief programs, using AI tools for for what is called predictional analysis is very, very important. And on the screen here, you would notice that in Africa, for example, a lot of AI tools are being used to look at the environment. What is missing here is food security, because that's a big issue in Africa as well as in parts of Asia. And so I think we should also look at how we can use artificial intelligence tools to analyze food security in terms of crop rotation, tissue culture, hybridization, agrarian or land reform. All of these are very important issues around agriculture. The Caribbean, of course, it's about disaster preparedness, education, health, Europe, climate change, among other things, China, East Asia, health, safety, welfare, etc. North America, again, has some of those issues. India, South Asia, again, another complex area where we need to look at food security as well. And the rest of the world, of course, is dealing with some other issues as well. But I think what this slide suggests is that we can use artificial intelligence to improve and enhance our humanitarian work across the globe. There are, of course, ethical and legal considerations. This morning, we were talking about privacy. We were talking about the Data Protection Act that we have in the United Kingdom of 2018. We were talking about encryptions and how they can be broken. We were talking about algorithmic models. Those who studied, for example, geometry, algebra, and Pythagoras theorems, those of us who studied arithmetic as against mathematics, all of these subject areas we have to return to because they're all science of numbers. And since AI is around numbers and languages, it is important that we become not just experts, but we develop a working knowledge of some of the formulas or formulae that are used to come up with these algorithms as we talk about, because the algorithms really are used to actually determine the kind of information we are looking for and the kind of data we are trying to access. So if you don't understand mathematical formulas, if you don't understand the language of technology, you'll find it very, very difficult to understand how to use it. And so there are some very important issues to consider here. Antitrust. This is where some organizations err on the side of judgment. There is a case at the moment in the United Kingdom where an IT company has been fined over £3 million because it breached what is called the safeguards of patients. I think over 3,000 patients' data have been breached. Very, very sensitive information on medication, for example, on diagnostic care, palliative care, all of that information has been left in the open because someone in the organization decided to take for granted certain safeguards. So that's a trust issue. It's also a privacy issue because there's a distinction between public and private data. So, for example, health services, immigration, banks, education institutions will hold information for us personally, our age, our names, our date of birth, where we live, our habits, for example, we might have a pet name or a call name. Those are private bits of information which can be publicized and seen as public data. So again, we have to distinguish between data privacy and public information. Anti-discrimination, this is where some people misuse other people's data. So for example, you misspell a person's name. That for me is a data breach because a person's name is his or her identity, or providing wrong information about the person's bank details. That can create problems for that person in terms of credit scoring, etc. And then you have in organizations where people do not have ethical practices. They don't pay their workers on time. They ill-treat their workers. They abuse them. Young women, young people, because of their age, they discriminate against them using AI and saying it's the computer error. It's not the computer error. It's the person who inputted information on the computer in the first place. There's the issue of price level, and we'll look at that, where some people find that it is very expensive to use AI tools because of the kind of maintenance that is involved and the amount of energy that it generates. And then there's deception. This is where people are fooled or scammed or hoodwinked into giving over their savings. Elders, for example, who get crank calls from various organizations saying you could invest in a pot scheme. Pot scheme meaning a scheme that doesn't exist. So there's a lot of that going on at the moment using machine learning. And then there's the fairness issue, how people are treated fairly. So sometimes people come on platforms, for example, and they're told information and they're given information and data that are not necessarily true. And that also is unfair practice. And then social justice issues. How do you treat people who use technology? You don't assume that because they use a smartphone, they are smart. You try to explain to them how to use the smartphone and how to access the information on it. So these are some of the ethical considerations. Ethics simply refers to behavior and attitudes, how we treat each other with respect. And legal, of course, is breaking the law. At the moment, a number of legal scholars and experts are trying to work out how to deal with technological information because, it is happening so quickly that even people in the field of law and jurisprudence are finding it difficult to keep up with technology. But we have to find a way to protect ourselves nevertheless. And that is what this platform is attempting to do as well. And so there are challenges and opportunities for global NGOs like yourselves, ourselves. So for example, in Africa, the challenge is limited access to data. Sometimes you have power outages there, and that affects people's tools of technology they're using. You also have instances where people don't have the expertise. So yes, everybody has a smartphone. In young people in Africa, India, and China are the greatest users of smartphone technology, but yet they struggle with it. Yet they have challenges with it. In Europe, it's about ethical concerns as well, because there is a huge responsibility on the European Union, for example, that is coming up with lots of technology rules and regulations. In Britain too, it's the same. In North America, ethical use of AI, we're seeing a lot of problems at the moment with that. But on the opportunity side, there's a lot that can be accomplished using artificial intelligence. And so, for example, in the case of agriculture and disaster preparedness, we can use data to predict cases of natural disasters. For example, we can use weather forecasting models to determine whether or not a farmer or farmers can harvest or cultivate crops, etc., or livestock, for example, in areas that are likely to be flooded. In the case of mobilizing communities and resource limitations or etc., we can use AI for that as well. We can use artificial technology to propagate social justice, how to behave towards individuals with different cultures, different ethnic groups, etc. And also we can use it to access information on how to put projects together. We can look at World Bank applications, for example, the International Monetary Fund. We can look at the Pan American Health Organization's reports on health awareness across the world and use that information to predict how we can also apply for funding in different areas. And so while there are immense challenges around the use of AI, equally there are opportunities that we can use to improve what we do as NGOs. The future trends in AI are quite enormous. And you notice at the top of the screen, it's agriculture. This particular slide came from a series of studies that I was looking at for the last 2 or 3 years around how AI can be used for agriculture. We know that, for example, the agricultural extension officers are there to provide education, information, guidance to farmers, particularly cash crops, crops that can be grown very quickly and harvested equally quickly. Livestock farming, of course, takes a longer time because if you're having goats and sheep and cows, etc., they take a longer time to actually develop. But AI can be used to actually predict the growth and development and the sustainability of both crop farming and livestock farming. That is something that many people within villages and even urban centers have not been using successfully. Most people use their technology to buy products and to understand harvesting techniques and markets, etc., but they don't use it to improve things like crop science, crop rotation, etc. And so I think NGOs who are involved in communal agricultural areas need to look at how AI can be used for this kind of things, whether it's crop propagation or harvesting. And then, of course, the environment. How do we use AI as NGOs to understand the change in climatic conditions? In the UK, for example, we are in the summer period, but yet it's cold. The sun is out, but it's very cold. You still have to wear 3 to 4 layers of clothing. And so if we have artificial intelligence tools, why can't we use it to help us to understand how to deal with climate change? Personal hygiene, for example, is a major issue in the UK and other parts of the world. The washing of hands, for example, very simple personal hygiene principle people have a difficulty with. How AI can do, what AI can do for that? Well, we can use AI to organize training programs, show people how to wash their hands, which again is basic, but how to inform them about how to drink water, how to boil water, how to prepare it, etc. So there's so many basic things we can do. The quality of education is also important as well. Having good health. And so AI can be used to promote economic growth and development. Again, we can assess the type of jobs that are in the labor market, look at the salary or the wage range of these jobs. What is the sustainability of these jobs? Are they subject to AI intervention? and of course, what kind of career prospects that we can have in these areas. And so artificial intelligence in the circle, as we look there, talks about machine learning. And this is where the machines are taught how to think. And then you have deep learning. This is where you are imaginative, you're creative, your critical thinking powers come into being. And as a result of that, you can actually create not just intelligence, intelligent decisions, but by extension, tools for improving and enhancing your NGOs as you know them. And so these are some of the future trends that we need to look at when it comes to artificial intelligence. And finally, this is a slide that I took from a series of studies on robotic trends. In other words, again, machines now being seen as sorts of humanoids, how they will be used. And this came from the International Federation of Robotics. They are conducting a series of studies, mostly in the Western world, unfortunately, to determine how the range of generative AI, this is artificial intelligence that is generated from start to finish, how they, when it is developed, will it impact on what is called labor shortages? And the issue is at the moment, how will we understand how to use these robots when they come into being? So for example, there are already certain cars that are driverless in the UAE, in Japan, China, and it is likely that in Europe we'll have them as well and other parts of the world. And then you have robots who will be operating in places like cafeterias, restaurants, etc. Of course, they cannot replace cooks and chefs, but they will certainly be serving people at their respective tables. And then there's the issue of energy consumption. This is something that we need to look at because the more AI tools we use, the more technology we use, the more we need to develop the capacity and capability when it comes to energy. And so that will be an issue too, looking at alternative energy sources like fossil fuels and solar power to power these AI tools and equipment. That is something that NGOs we need to look at as well. And then, of course, how can AI affect our customers, our service users? How do we access business from our customers? What will we do? What would be our programs? How do we sell our services, particularly if our services are intangible? How do we promote information about what we do? How do we promote service expectations? What value add can we bring to the table when it comes to using AI to help our service users? And finally, how do we address labor shortages, imminent or impending or future, in the case of robotic technology? These are some of the questions and more that we need to look at as we sometimes brazenly move forward with technology, consuming all of it without understanding the consequences of it. And so as NGOs, we need to be practical, we need to be realistic, and recognize that if we are using modern technology, we need to use it wisely and intelligently. And so today, what have we learned? We learned that artificial intelligence is a combination of science and engineering, where machines are being taught to think like human beings and to respond like human beings adequately. We know that is not always the case because there will be issues. We looked at the relevance of AI to NGOs, how they can support and add value. We looked at how AI can enhance fundraising projects by predictive analytics, collecting information and data about different projects. We looked at how AI can impact on people's careers, their career advancement, their education, professional development, how it could also influence the way we use social media for private as well as public consumption, how we can use it to impact on the work we do with vulnerable communities, how we deal with human disaster as well as natural disasters. And then we have the behavioral aspect of AI. What is our attitude towards the use of AI? Do we respect its usage? Do we respect the people who use it? Do we have value? Do we value the information that is accessed from AI tools? Do we corroborate that information? Do we check, double check, triple check, quadruple check? Or do we just accept information because we think it comes from an authoritative source or sources? And how would we challenge the use of AI tools in our NGO organizations? How would we challenge them while looking for opportunities in the very use of those tools that we have to use? And finally, how would future trends in AI affect us individually, collectively? How would it influence our public discourse with decision makers? And in our organizational capacity, how would we use it to improve and deepen our involvement in our various communities? So many questions that we can ask ourselves. And I think it lies in how we intelligently and decisively use AI for the betterment of everyone in the world in which we live. I thank you very much for listening. And at this time, I'd like to avail myself to any questions that you would like to ask. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Christopher, for insightful presentation. Participants, now we are beginning Q&A session. Please send in your questions. Uh, the first question which we have received is, are there tools that one can use to transform AI content or write up so that a funder who insists that AI is not allowed, like in a case where grant application restrict that use of AI by any applicant, will lead to disqualification?
Yes, I mean, I would suggest there are no real, look, there's so many different artificial intelligence tools that can be used. You can use, for example, Google Imaging. That will give you the image of certain things, some of which I use here, but I also source the information. You could also use ChatGPT, but again, it will give you a structure, but you still have to input information. I think the problem that applicants have is that they don't know how to do basic research. And I'm not trying to pull a fast one on any of you guys here because you guys know your work. But some people don't understand the science of research. And it goes back to what I was saying earlier. Quality information, quality data would give you a quality application. The AI tools will just provide you with suggestions, prompts. They will provide you with structures, examples based on what exists. But your application is authentic, and that's why I use the word imagination. You have to be imaginative, creative. Yes, by all means use AI, but don't depend on it. Don't rely on it. Because if you rely on it, after a while you wouldn't be able to think. And I think that's the issue people have. So it doesn't matter which tool or tools you use. At the end of the day, you have to be imaginative in terms of what you put in your application. I hope that satisfies some of our questioners on this platform, because there's no easy way to answer this than to say that you need to be self-reliant in the use of information and data.
Thank you, Dr. Christopher, for this. The next question is utilizing AI in humanitarian work. Does this mean no one has been deploying AI as yet?
No, that is not necessarily true. In fact, to be quite honest, it is AI that has been used to, uh, I don't want to use the word decimate, but that's the word that comes to mind, decimate the USAID funding for parts of Africa and Asia and the Caribbean and Latin American region, because no one knows, for example, why USAID was suspended. There are allegations about fraud and deception and all of that, but no one is coming up with concrete figures. So, for example, hard evidence in terms of numbers, data. We are driven by data, numbers, not just the language of numbers, but the numbers themselves. So unless you have hard evidence, you cannot argue sensibly and consistently about being disenfranchised. And I think that's the problem NGOs have. Most times they don't have data. You know, I deal with companies every day and charities, and I said, okay, what evidence do you have? How many people do you support? Well, I think I supported 100 last year. Do you have an evaluation report? Do you have an impact assessment report? Oh, I didn't know you have to do that. I said, well, you use technology. You should be able to get that. Oh, we weren't taught that. So again, the onus is on NGOs, because NGOs are there to lead by example and precept, not to follow. That's our job, to lead by example. So we have to look at different ways whereby we can access information. And the AI have tools that we can use. But those tools have to be used based on credible information, not information from AI, because AI is written by other people.
Thank you, Doctor, for your input. The next question, can AI be used as a personal assistant?
Well, AI is being used as a personal assistant in many ways. Electra, for example, is used in this country. When I was traveling on the train from the Midlands to London, when the train journey ended, the train driver said, "Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for traveling with Avanti West Midlands. On behalf of myself and my AI friend Helena, I'd like to thank you very much." And everybody burst out laughing, because he was actually telling us that it's AI who was talking all the time, and not a female person, as a physical being. So yes, AIs are used as personal assistants, but the problem with that is that it cannot respond to complex problems. So for example, if you ask the personal assistant AI, could you please get this information for me from this village or from this town? It cannot. It will give you a source, but that source, that information might be out of date. So it is not AI is the problem sometimes, it's the programming of it. Programming means what input has been embedded into that particular tool. And that is why we have to question every AI tool we use to determine whether or not the information is accurate or not. And that has always been my concern. It's not the tool that we use, it's how effective and efficient it is that is important. So be careful with AI assistant tools.
Thank you, Doctor, for your input. The next question is, can you say a little bit more about machine learning tools for fundraising, like donor retention and identifying relevant donors mentioned earlier?
Yes, machine learning is where there are certain types of machines. So for example, you have ChatGPT, you have Electra, you have Google Images, you have Scientific Commons. All of these are different web links and tools that can be used to access information. Again, I'm coming back to my constant refrain. Information is key. We have become so over-reliant on technology now that we don't have the capacity to think. And so if I ask one of the NGOs the question, for example, have you conducted a predictive analysis of your service users for the next 5 or 10 years? Most of you will say, no. What is that? Do I need to use AI? You don't have to, but you can use the tools that AI have to do your predictive analysis. So you can do surveys, you can do questionnaires, you can talk to people face to face, do sample size uh, interviews and so on to get that information. When you have that information, you can then put it in ChatGPT and ask them to come up with a figure for you, analytics, and it will do it. So again, use AI tools efficiently and effectively based on practical information you have. And remember, AI can only practically apply what information is there. It cannot do guesswork. It's not there for that. It is taught, and this is machine learning. The machine is taught to act and behave like human beings. So it is programmed. So human beings have to be more superior than the machines themselves.
Thank you,
Thank
Doctor, for your input. The next question is I use ChatGPT and now it can take things from the internet. Could I be sued for if it takes information that is an infringement or someone else's work? Would I have to research all that I'm given?
Yes, I mean, what is interesting about that question is that when ChatGPT gives you information, particularly statistical data, labor market information, health indicators, information on elders, information on new businesses, information on government policies, they always refer to different sources of information. What I would say to people, so for example, you might have footnote 1, footnote 2, footnote 3, footnote 4. What I usually do, I usually go on those footnotes, I click on them, and I read the entire document. I don't just accept it like that. And this is where you have to be vigilant. You read the information carefully, you study it, you're patient, and then you look to see if the information is out of date. Because most times, those tools that are used on AI, a lot of the information are not up to date. And AI will tell you. So, for example, you might say, okay, could I have future trends for computing, let's say in India by the year 2030, or Europe or one of the other countries in the world? You might be lucky to get that information. Because if the countries of origin have not done that planning, that strategic planning, how would AI have it? So again, it's about the input of information from human beings that will determine the successful application of AI by individuals and groups.
Thank you, Doctor, for your input. Uh,
Okay.
the next question is do you recommend digital literacy and AI literacy training first before AI use and deployment for NGOs?
It's interesting who was asked that question because that is the other point I was going to make. Yes, I would say digital literacy, but not just being able to, digital literacy really is about, it's not just about understanding how to use digital technology, but it's also is the functional use of it. So for example, most people use WhatsApp. They do WhatsApp to FaceTime, they use WhatsApp to send messages and so on. But how many of us on this platform know that it's unethical? It's not illegal, it's unethical to use WhatsApp to exchange financial information. So, for example, sending invoices on WhatsApp. You should not do that. People do that. Or sending sensitive reports on WhatsApp. You should not do that. People do it for convenience. Why? Because we rely on technology to do everything for us. I usually say to clients, send it on email because at least it's safer because you are in control. When you have your WhatsApp, you're not in control. You think you're in control, but your WhatsApp is hackable. So I think we have to be very smart and sensible in how we use the technology um, in order to protect ourselves, our families, and even our businesses.
Thank you, Doctor, for your input. The next question is uh, thank you for the presentation. How can AI improve fundraising effectiveness in local context where impact is high, but funding remains a challenge?
Yes, this is where AI has to be used as, if you like, an analytical tool. I was talking about predictive analytics. Predictive analytics simply means using information and data to predict or to make certain assumptions. So, for example, if we have on this platform 135 to 150 people, I would have to surmise or assume, okay, out of 130 or 150, 75% of people would have been able to apply some of the information I've given to them. I might be wrong in making that assumption, but I'm using the feedback that you've given me or given funds for NGOs over the last year and a half to make that assumption. And that is the kind of prediction that NGOs um, are not engaged in, to be quite honest, because they're busy trying to fundraise. But if you want to see the effect of AI tools on fundraising, again, find out from your funders what type of funds are available because AI wouldn't give you that. I'm sorry, they would not give you that because that is sensitive information. So again, use the electronic source, use the Google search to find out where information is, where it can be had. Look at the budget that is passed by the government. Look at where money is being budgeted for NGOs and use that information to come up with a strategy for fundraising rather than depending on AI to do everything for you. Because you are AI itself. Artificial intelligence means human intelligence. That's what it means.
Thank you, Doctor, for your input. The last question is what AI tools are available to assist with grant application, including research writing and submission report, while understanding that we cannot solely rely on these tools before submitting the application?
Yes, at the moment, ChatGPT is probably among the greatest ones. Because through that you can have access to information. I use ChatGPT just for guidance. I don't use it as an application tool proper. And when I say guidance, because it refers to different documents. So for example, if you're doing a piece of research on developing a project for young people, let's say young people are involved in textiles production or manufacturing or apprenticeships, you would look for information. For example, you might ask the question, how many young people are interested in textiles manufacturing in Uttar Pradesh, for example? How many young people are interested in livestock farming in Mombasa, Kenya, for example? Or you might say, how many women are involved in agriculture in Ecuador or Honduras? Now, that information may not exist at all even within governments, let alone AI. So this is where you have to use AI very wisely. And sometimes you might have to code the question, for example, how many agricultural producers are in those countries? How many textile producers or manufacturers are in those countries? And then you'll probably get some information that is close to that. And then you take that information and you use it to analyze other, if you like, other areas of predictability. So I think it's not just digital literacy that we need to teach ourselves, but also research. And I hope that this is something that I can help you guys with on this platform, because research is a big area, and if you lack research skills, using digital technology will only complicate it, I'm afraid. So I think we have to combine both human as well as machine learning in order to help ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Christopher. Participants, due to time limitations, we cannot cover all the questions posted here. As now we have reached the end of the webinar, I want to thank each one of you for your active participation. On behalf of the entire team, we would also like to thank Dr. Christopher for his valuable insights. Participants, please take a moment to fill out the feedback form for today's session. Your input is crucial in helping us improve. If you have any questions, suggestions, feel free to contact us at support@fundsforNGOs.org. The feedback form will appear on your screen in a moment. Once again, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Christopher. We look
Welcome.
forward to seeing you in our next webinar.
Thank you very much. Goodbye, everyone. Bye.
Bye.